He stopped the plane with his body refused to move, ears locked on the cargo hold because what no machine could see, his nose already knew. Someone was hiding something the world was never meant to find. This isn't just a story about a dog. This is about the last creature they couldn't corrupt. The last gatekeeper. His name is Duke, and the moment he sat down, everything changed. If you're watching this, you're already part of the story. So tell me, where are you watching from? What moment grabbed you hardest? Drop it in the comments, like, subscribe, and stay close. Because this isn't over. The sun had barely begun its climb when Marcus Bell walked Duke out onto the tarmac of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The world smelled different at this hour. Still sleepy, not yet cluttered with exhaust fumes and the perfume of thousands of travelers. His boots pressed into the dewy pavement, and beside him, Duke trotted with the poised tension of a soldier who never forgot the battlefield. Marcus gave a quick glance toward the horizon where planes idled in their lanes like giant beasts waiting to be unshackled. His breath fogged briefly in the cool air as he adjusted the strap of his tactical vest. Another day in paradise, huh boy, he muttered. Duke's ears flicked once, as if in acknowledgment before he resumed his steady rhythm. They were running their usual perimeter check, gate to gate D, around the cargo bays, through the ground service areas. Marcus liked it quiet. Liked the solitude of routine. There were no explosions here, no desperate radio calls, no dirt-covered brothers screaming for medics. Here, his war was silent, controlled, and Duke, his partner, his brother-in-arms, was the last thread tying him to something that still made sense. They passed a group of cargo handlers laughing around a pallet of vacuum-sealed electronics. Marcus nodded to the supervisor, who barely looked up from his clipboard. The two men had never exchanged more than 10 words in 3 years, and that was just fine. Relationships at war were deep, back home they were shallow. Safer that way. Marcus let Duke lead into the checkpoint near the loading platform for Gate 77. Flight NX-215 direct to Frankfurt was scheduled for wheels up in 23 minutes. The Boeing 777 gleamed under the hangar lights, its fuselage freshly cleaned. A forklift rumbled nearby, hauling a steel-gray container marked with customs clearance tags. Duke's nose twitched. Marcus noticed it immediately. Smell something, bud? Duke didn't respond with the usual cue, a tail twitch or a glance. His body grew tense. Still, eyes locked on the cargo lift. One paw moved forward. Then another. Marcus reached instinctively for the leash, but Duke was already in motion. It happened in a blink. Duke surged forward with a guttural bark, yanking Marcus forward. The leash stretched taut, then slipped from Marcus's fingers entirely. Before he could shout, Duke was gone, bolting straight across the tarmac like a bullet fired from a silent gun. A shout rang out from the tower. K9 on the runway. Repeat, K9 on the runway. Duke, heel, heel, Marcus bellowed. But Duke didn't slow. He wasn't just running. He was targeting. The Boeing had begun rolling, its front wheels creeping along the yellow taxi guide. Pilots in the cockpit probably thought the disturbance was some mechanical delay, until a blur of black and brown fur stopped dead in their path. Duke planted himself squarely in front of the nose gear, chest heaving, low growl vibrating through his throat. It wasn't fear, it was something else, something primal, a warning. Chaos exploded over the comms. All operations hold at Gate 77. All ops hold, ground alert. Sirens began to wail from across the tarmac. Orange-vested personnel swarmed the area. Marcus ran, heart hammering as he cut through the blare of shouting and radio static. By the time he reached Duke, 2 airfield security officers had drawn batons but hadn't approached, unsure whether to confront the dog or the man coming at full. Stand down, Marcus barked, flashing his ID as he skidded to a halt. Handler Bell, K9 Division, let me talk to him. Your dog's gone rogue, one officer snapped. But Marcus ignored him. He crouched in front of Duke, placing a hand gently on his collar. What is it, boy? He whispered. Duke's eyes didn't move. His head jerked toward the cargo container now sitting quietly in the open bay of the 777. Marcus followed his gaze. The forklift operator, frozen with wide eyes, stammered something about a last-minute manifest edition. Tell them to stop the plane, Marcus said quietly into his radio. Don't move it. No one touches that container until we clear it. Jatch crackled. What's the code? We already cleared it. I don't care. I trust this dog with my life. Something's off. Copy that. Tower confirming full ground stop. Within 5 minutes, the area turned into a secured zone. Airport police, TSA, and a supervisory team from Homeland Conversion. Marcus stood beside Duke, hand on his flank, every inch of him a coiled spring of tension. A man in a slick blue jacket and government badge stepped into the perimeter. Who's responsible for this delay? Marcus straightened. Handler Marcus Bell, K9 Duke, Unit 7B. The man scowled. This better be good. It will be, Marcus replied evenly, locking eyes with the man. Because he's never been wrong. From behind them, a distant sound, the snap click of the cargo bay's latches being unlocked. Duke's ears perked sharply. He growled again. Marcus tensed. Something was coming, and for the first time in over a decade, he didn't just smell danger, he felt it in his bones. The meeting room was cold, fluorescent, and smelled faintly of burnt coffee and decades of frustration. Marcus sat alone at the end of a long metal table, his badge on the surface in front of him, Duke's leash folded neatly beside it. His uniform was still damp from the early morning mist, but he hadn't moved since they'd told him to wait. 3 hours had passed. No one had brought water. No one had spoken to him since they took Duke away. The door opened with a hiss, and 2 men in suits entered, followed by a woman in TSA uniform who kept her distance. The older of the 2 men sat down across from Marcus and tapped a tablet before speaking. Marcus Bell, handler, former U.S. Army Special Operations. Joined TSA's K9 Division 5 years ago, clean record until today. His tone was accusatory, like a prosecutor warming up. Marcus didn't flinch. You stopped a fully loaded commercial aircraft without a confirmed threat. That's a federal violation. Do you understand the implications? Marcus kept his eyes on the man, jaw clenched. My dog reacted to something in the cargo. He doesn't react without cause. The second man, younger, more restless, leaned in. And you're telling us the ground inspection teams found nothing suspicious in that container. You understand how that makes you look? Marcus's voice was even calm, like a man used to dealing with bureaucratic games. The dog wasn't reacting to paperweight, he was reacting to what was actually in there. Something your scanners missed. The older man raised an eyebrow. So you're saying our systems failed? That your German Shepherd knows more than a $20 million scanning array? Marcus stared him down. I'm saying Duke has saved more lives than those scanners have ever detected. The room went quiet. Then the woman finally spoke. Her place. Your K9 unit will be reassigned during the investigation. Please surrender your access credentials. Marcus's chest tightened. Where's Duke? He's being held at the K9 holding facility until a decision is made, she replied. You'll be notified if further action is taken. Marcus stood slowly, picked up the leash and left it on the table. As he turned to leave, the older man added coldly, You're lucky, you're not facing charges. The airport bustled as if nothing had happened. Planes taxied, announcements played on loop. Travelers grumbled about delays and drank overpriced coffee. Marcus walked with mechanical precision, his body present but his mind locked on Duke. They had been through war zones together. He knew Duke better than he knew most people. And Dia Chandler not once acted without reason. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Inside Terminal D, Captain Latoya Franklin watched the slow reset of operations from the observation deck. Arms crossed, lips pressed together in concern. She had flown that 777 for the last 7 years, knew every inch of her aircraft like the back of her hand. And something had felt off the moment she reviewed the flight plan this morning. There had been a last-minute manifest change, which wasn't unusual, but the route had been preloaded, locked in, with no room for manual adjustments. The system normally flagged that. Today it hadn't. When Duke blocked the plane, something in her gut had clicked. She had heard stories about the bond between a handler and his dog, about how some dogs had senses even machines couldn't replicate. And Marcus, he had looked like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. She didn't know him, but she'd seen that expression before. War-worn, hyper-aware. Soldiers knew each other, even when they didn't speak. She tapped her comm. Tower, this is Captain Franklin requesting tech review logs for flight NX-215, tail number 93 FKZ for the past 24 hours. The reply was sluggish. Caption, those logs are classified under current federal security audit. You'd have to file a formal request. She narrowed her eyes. Understood. Send me the request protocol. But she already knew she wouldn't wait. After landing, she had quietly copied the black box telemetry data to a secondary drive she carried for redundancy. She hadn't told anyone. Instinct. That same instinct that told her to find Marcus Bell. He wasn't in the staff lounge, not at the operations center. After nearly an hour of searching, she spotted him on the roof-level parking deck, standing beside an old black Charger, arms resting on the trunk bay. Head bowed, she approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. "You're not just gonna let them pin this on you, are you?" she asked. Marcus looked up, his expression unreadable. "You're the pilot." She nodded. "Captain Latoya Franklin. I was in the cockpit when your dog made his move." He gave a slow nod. "He saved your life." She smirked just a little. "Then I owe you both a drink." He didn't smile. "What do you want?" "To know why I couldn't override my own flight path this morning. To know why a container was added 15 minutes before departure with no digital signature trail. And to know why my pre-check system showed a false clearance code I've never seen before." Marcus blinked. "You saw that too? You're not crazy, Belle. And I think someone doesn't want us comparing notes." For the first time that day, Marcus's stance eased slightly. "They took Duke? We'll get him back," she said. "But first we find out what was in that container, and who made sure no one saw it coming." She pulled a flash drive from her jacket. "Black box copy. Got it right before they shut me out. You know anyone who can read encrypted flight logs?" Marcus took the drive, eyes narrowing. "I might." Latoya glanced over her shoulder. "Then let's not waste time." They climbed into the Charger, and as Marcus turned the key, the engine roared to life like something stirring from hibernation. Outside the terminal, the first stars began to show. Inside the container Duke had stopped, federal agents were opening a second false panel behind the electronics manifest. And what they found, what they weren't prepared for, wasn't on any shipping manifest. But the agents wouldn't be the only ones who saw it. The airport's VIP lounge wasn't particularly luxurious, but it had silence, espresso, and frosted windows that turned the world outside into a blurred watercolor. Jordan Ellis leaned back in a leather chair that creaked under her, one hand on a lukewarm latte, the other tapping across her tablet. Her red-rimmed glasses slid halfway down her nose, and she pushed them back absently. She had been stuck at Hartsfield-Jackson for 5 hours due to a flight rescheduling snafu, something about a security incident, but no one would say more. Her editor in DC was already blowing up her phone, asking for live commentary on a completely unrelated political scandal. But Jordan's gut told her there was something more interesting happening in Terminal G. That sense of invisible heat in the air, the way staff whispered into radios, the hasty redirecting of flights. Something wasn't right, and in her world, not right usually meant worth digging into. She pulled up the FAA's real-time flight tracker and noticed a sudden reroute order logged against flight NX-215, bound for Frankfurt. No reason given, but it had sat on the tarmac almost 45 minutes. That was long enough for someone to panic or to hide something. She rubbed her temples and sighed, wondering if she'd be stuck in this airport all night when 2 men in suits walked in briskly, one speaking in hurried tones into his Bluetooth earpiece. "I told you it wasn't supposed to be loaded onto this flight. That's the whole reason we had that override manifest. If the K9 hadn't..." The man caught himself, glanced around the room. Jordan froze, angled her body, and slowly turned down the volume on the TV playing CNN in the corner. Her reporter's instinct kicked in like a second heartbeat. The taller of the 2 men leaned in, whispered something. Jordan couldn't hear the full exchange, but one word cut through loud and clear. "Langley." She blinked. Langley as in the CIA or the company name. Either way, the context was wrong. She recognized the tension in the man's posture. Not nervousness, but urgency dressed in civility. One of them noticed her glance and gave her a too tight smile. She smiled back, lifted her latte, and made a show of returning to her screen. But her tablet was now recording. 20 minutes later, she was seated in the corner of the lounge, earbuds in, pretending to watch a travel documentary while scrubbing through the recorded audio. Most of it was muffled, frustratingly indirect, but one phrase came through crystal clear. "Should have used Newark again, too much heat here after Dubai." Her eyes narrowed. Dubai, Newark, heat. and a dog that apparently messed up someone's plan. Something was in motion, something that crossed oceans. She needed a name, a link, a thread to pull. Then her phone buzzed with a message from a friend who worked in social media curation. The link had no caption, just a video attachment titled, "K9 Saves Plane?" Jordan opened it and watched a German Shepherd, black and brown like burned whiskey, sprint in front of a rolling jetliner, refusing to move. The handler ran after him, shouting commands. Then came the ground chaos. Alarms, freeze frames, security swarming. The clip was raw, clearly shot from a distance on a phone camera, but it was real, the kind of real that couldn't be staged. She replayed it twice, watching the dog's body language, the frantic but focused stance. Not panic, precision. This wasn't a dog gone wild. This was a dog on mission. And within the hour, the video was gone. Not just removed, erased. All reposts had vanished. She refreshed YouTube, Twitter, Reddit. Nothing. Her friend texted again. Scrub hard. Like federal level hard. Someone paid big to bury this. Jordan didn't believe in coincidences. She believed in leverage. If a dog could stop a plane and that story got buried before it even trended, there were forces at play worth exposing. She began to cross-reference the tail number on the video with flight records. NX-215. Frankfurt bound, just like the flight she was supposed to be on before her reroute. Her fingers froze. That meant she'd nearly been on that plane. Across the city, Marcus and LaToya sat inside a cramped back room at an old auto garage in East Point. The only light came from a flickering desk lamp illuminating the flash drive LaToya had brought. Marcus had just finished decoding the flight route data and confirming that someone had embedded a control lockout in the autopilot. "They overrode your inputs," he said. "Yeah," LaToya replied grimly. "And I bet that override wasn't FAA authorized." Marcus nodded. "We need someone who can go public, someone who isn't tied to a badge or a uniform." His phone buzzed. It was a secure line, one he rarely gave out. The number was local. A text came through. It read, "Are you the handler from NX-215? I have questions. You may have answers. Meet me 9:30. Marcus showed the screen to LaToya. She arched a brow. "JE? I don't know. But if they're asking about the dog, they're not just a bystander." Or, she said, "they're bait." Marcus shrugged. Only one way to find out. At precisely 9:30 p.m., Marcus stepped into Highland Bakery, a low-lit cafe turned late-night study haven, and spotted a woman with short dreads and a burnt orange jacket seated near the window. She lifted her hand halfway. He approached. "Jordan Ellis?" he asked. She nodded. "You're him." He didn't sit immediately. "How'd you found people who don't want to be found? What do you want?" "The truth," Jordan replied, sliding over a tablet. "That's your dog, right?" The video played in silence. Marcus watched it, jaw tightening. "They scrubbed this." "Exactly. I recorded it off a friend's leak before it disappeared, and I have audio from a man saying it was never supposed to be on this flight. They mentioned Langley. And Dubai, you see where this goes? You were supposed to be on NX-215? Delayed last minute," she said. "Wrong place, right time. You smell something, handler?" Marcus met her eyes. "Yeah. Smoke. From a fire someone's trying real hard to hide." Jordan leaned forward. "You want this out there?" "Not yet," he said. "Not until we know who we're up against." As they spoke, LaToya parked across the street, keeping watch from a borrowed sedan. She tapped into a dark web aviation forum, her fingers dancing across the screen, when a post caught her attention. Manifest intercept from ATL NX-215. Source, internal. Possible black cargo reroute. Warning, eyes watching. Brat the dry... What none of them noticed was the man sitting 3 tables away, sipping tea, pretending to read a newspaper, and texting silently beneath the table. They're connecting. Handler, pilot, journalist. Moving to phase 2. Await orders. And across the globe, in a room filled with LED screens and satellite feeds, someone smiled without blinking. 2 days later, Marcus stood outside a restricted zone at the east end of the airport's decommissioned hangar, hands in his pockets, watching as a private transport van backed into the covered bay. The van's logo read Hartsfield Internal Logistics, But Marcus had seen enough ops in his day to recognize a ghost carrier when he saw one. The tail number spray-painted on the side wasn't registered. Inside the hangar, Latoya and Jordan waited beside an inspection table, both wearing plain clothes and official-looking lanyards with access codes Elizabeth Winters had quietly authorized. Duke, freshly returned to Marcus after intense internal pressure from Elizabeth and a couple of sympathetic agents, sat alert by the door, eyes never leaving the cargo bay. They hadn't been able to hold Duke for long. The public attention around his video, and a quiet leak to one aviation oversight watchdog, had forced hands behind the scenes to play nice. For now, Marcus entered with a slow, measured step, giving Duke a soft signal. Search. The dog sprang into action, nose low, moving with clinical precision past stacked containers that had been cleared twice, once by TSA and once by a private third-party firm that happened to be funded by a defense subcontractor. It didn't matter. Duke didn't care about politics. He cared about scent. Ears perked, shoulders braced. He circled twice, then sat. Not barking, just a firm stare and a low whine. Marcus nodded. He's found it. The agent on site, a thin man in a blazer too expensive for this line of work, chuckled. Come on. That's been cleared top to bottom. Nothing but encrypted routers and diagnostic scanners. You're wasting our time. Marcus approached slowly. Open it. The agent hesitated. We don't have authorization to. You're looking at authorization, Latoya cut in, flashing a digital warrant. Thanks to a senator who doesn't like being lied to. The agent scowled, but waved a technician forward. They cracked the seal. As the door hissed open, cold air spilled out, and a sterile smell of plastic and ozone hit Marcus like a hospital corridor. Rows of black cases, each labeled COM NCO, lined the interior. Jordan began snapping photos discreetly. If it's just routers, then great, she said. Let's see them. The technician hesitated but began unpacking the first case. Everything appeared textbook: network ports, diagnostic lights, fiber optics. But as he lifted one cable bundle, Duke growled low and guttural. Marcus stepped forward. Under that, the man peeled back a panel, and Marcus's eyes narrowed. Hand me that. He took a corner and held it up to the light. It shimmered faintly. Not quite right. He turned to Jordan. Do you still have your UV flashlight? She handed it over without a word. Under the beam, the cloth revealed faint grid lines woven through like veins. Marcus turned to the agent. What kind of cloth gives off UV patterns in a hexagonal matrix? The man didn't answer. Jordan's camera clicked twice. Duke, meanwhile, nudged another corner of the case, scratching at a small compartment that hadn't been cataloged in the manifest. Latoya knelt down and pressed on the edge. It clicked inward, and the side wall popped loose. Inside was a compact stack of silver-wrapped boards, each no bigger than a book. What the hell are these? She asked. Marcus took one and peeled back the wrapping with surgical care. Embedded in the board was a web of circuitry, finer than any commercial tech he'd seen. The materials shimmered under the UV light, unnatural, smooth, like wet stone. Jordan muttered, I've seen something like that before. In a DARPA leak 5 years ago. They were experimenting with cloaking chips hardware that could suppress its digital and electromagnetic signature. Marcus's eyes didn't leave the board. This isn't just a chip. This is something new. They ran the boards through 3 different scanners. Thermal, X-ray, EM field detection. Nothing pinged. The devices read as blank polymer shells, but Duke kept reacting, pacing each time one of them touched the materials. Marcus stepped back. We need independent confirmation. A lab. Now, Latoya nodded. I know a guy, used to work with Air Force Research Lab. Left after a funding dispute, now consults for investigative journalism teams. You owes me a favor. Jordan raised an eyebrow. You have very interesting friends. You're in the wrong line of... 3 hours later, in a cold office on the 3rd floor of a nondescript warehouse near Decatur, the board sat on a sterile testing platform under the guidance of a man named Dr. Royce Hall. He was small, twitchy, and smoked cloves through the side door every 15 minutes. But he had clearance-level equipment and a deep disdain for defense contractors. Marcus watched silently as Hall ran the samples through layered scan. It's coded, Hall said at last. With chlorocarbon. Latoya leaned forward. Explain. Carbon-based molecular shell with chlorinated cross-link bonds. developed as early as stealth tech. It doesn't just mask electromagnetic fields, it bends low-level radiation signatures and mimics standard materials. Your scanner says it's nylon, it's not, to the right audience. Sure. In court? Might take months. Jordan stepped forward. We don't have months. We need something media-proof, legally watertight, and fast. Hall gestured at Duke, lying calmly nearby. You already have it. This dog. If I run a blind test with your dog on 5 sample cases, and he picks the chlorocarbon every time, that's not just intuition, that's science. Jordan's eyes lit up. Let's do it. Over the next hour, Hall constructed 5 identical sample boxes, each layered with different materials: standard insulation, fiberglass, synthetic cloth, steel mesh, and one coated with chlorocarbon. They rearranged the order 3 times. Duke picked the chlorocarbon case each time without hesitation, jaw slack. That's impossible. Marcus smiled faintly. No, that's Duke. Jordan turned to LaToya. Now we go public. LaToya shook her head. Not yet. We go up the chain first. But none of them noticed the small black drone hovering outside the warehouse window, its lens blinking red once, before turning away into the fog. The next morning, Jordan sat hunched over her laptop in the corner booth of a small 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Decatur. Empty coffee cups scattered around her like shell casings. Her eyes burned from staring too long at encrypted manifests, customs logs, and obscure logistics company databases. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten anything that didn't come out of a vending machine, and her only companion through the night had been the low static hum of a police scanner streaming through her earbuds. But now, the payoff sat blinking on her screen, waiting to be opened. After hours of digging through rerouted IPs and shell companies, she had traced the shipping manifest from flight NX-215 to a carrier labeled SDT Holdings, which on the surface was just another subcontractor for international defense logistics. But once she cross-referenced SDT's tax filings with a leaked dataset from the 2021 Pandora breach, the truth emerged like a submerged. SGT Holdings was a cover. The real name behind the routing code was Stratus Dynamics, an offshore entity that operated out of Cyprus and Singapore. But it wasn't the name that made Jordan's chest tighten. It was the CEO listed on a pre-acquisition document buried in a Swedish asset transfer. Ivan Krasik. The name didn't immediately ring a bell until she ran it through her media database, and then the pieces fell into place like a snap-to-fit conspiracy. Ivan Krasik, former Eastern Bloc intelligence officer, notorious for his brutal black-at-arms network during the Bosnian conflict, vanished in 2008 after an attempted extradition. The DOJ had issued sealed indictments, and Empal had red notices stacked a foot deep, but Krasik had never been arrested. According to the documents, he was now a strategic advisor to Stratos Dynamics. Not on paper, but in encrypted emails pulled from a whistleblower's cache Jordan had access to through an old source. She scrolled further. One particular file contained a subject line, A cargo-immunity via cloak, and it was dated 2 weeks before NX-215. Jordan didn't wait. She snapped a photo of the screen and immediately called Marcus. It was just past 7 a.m. and his voice sounded like gravel, but he was listening before she said his name. Stratos Dynamics is behind the shipment, she said, and Ivan Krasik is running point. Silence stretched over the line like a drawn bowstring. You sure? Unless there's another Krasik with CAA warrants and 3 fake passports, she replied. He's been hiding behind shell companies and laundering defense tech across multiple continents. Your dog didn't just sniff a bomb. He sniffed the trail of a ghost. Marcus was already dressing as she spoke, boots thudding against the floor. Send me what you have. Already did. Check your inbox. He opened it seconds later, scrolling through a PDF that read like a spy thriller crossed with a congressional indictment. Then he paused on a name mentioned in one of the older dispatches from Afghanistan. The line was innocuous enough. Supply convoy breach near Helmand, loss of 3 units, response team deployed under Shadow protocol. Shadow. His breath caught. He remembered the call sign, remembered the desert air clawing at his lungs and the way Duke had darted into the dark ahead of the team, alert to something no one else could see. That mission wasn't logged in his active records. It wasn't even listed under classified. It was gone. Scrubbed. He grabbed his encrypted drive and logged into the military's archive system, using a workaround a retired sergeant had taught him. He searched for his Unit 3rd Tactical K9 Forward Response, Afghanistan Theater, 2013-2014. Every mission was listed, cataloged, timestamped. Except one, June 12, 2014, marked only as Joint Civil Recon. No GPS tags, no handler logs, no K9 records. Just a digital void where an entire week should have been. Marcus's stomach churned. He tried accessing Duke's file. It was there, but when he scrolled to the same date range, the file stuttered and reloaded, wiping the content. A red system alert blinked in the corner. Restricted access. Echelon tier clearance required. He whispered, "Someone erased it. Not just sealed it, erased it." He turned to Elizabeth Winters, who had arrived minutes earlier with a cup of gas station coffee and her usual half-exhausted scowl. "I need access to a deeper database. Something off books." She raised a brow. "You're already playing with fire. What's going on?" "I think the operation Duke and I were part of wasn't just off the books. It was covered up, and I think it connects to whatever Stratos Dynamics is doing now." He showed her the files Jordan had uncovered. Elizabeth's jaw tightened. Krasik is supposed to be a ghost. If he's behind this, we're not just dealing with rogue shipping. We're dealing with extra-legal ops backed by black-budget interests. The kind that make even the alphabet agencies nervous. Marcus looked at her. "We need to know what Duke found in Helmand." "That's assuming Duke even remembers," she said. "He remembers everything that matters," Marcus replied. Later that afternoon, they drove to the military archive warehouse in Charleston, South Carolina, a redacted site used for decommissioned K9 logs and behavioral data storage. The building was disguised as a veterinary pharmaceutical distributor, but inside, it was all steel doors and retinal scanners. Elizabeth vouched for them using a backdoor Homeland directive, and a terminal in the far corner hummed to life as Marcus logged in. He bypassed the front-end UI and coded directly into the archival feed. He ran a comparison. Duke's current scent profile against logged exposure events. Only one match appeared in Duke's history with a unique olfactory signature labeled HH Black. The last recorded instance of that scent, June 2014, Helmand Province. The same composition had appeared again on Flight NX-215. Carbomb wasn't the real danger, it was the carrier. The scent Duke reacted to wasn't the coating, it was what the coating was hiding. Elizabeth read over his shoulder. "It's not shielding just electronics," she said. "It's shielding something biological." Jordan's voice came over the phone speaker, loud and tight. "I found a shipment log buried under 5 proxies. Destination, Dara Research Station. The description code was DSR-N2. Neural harvest components." Marcus went cold. "Whatever they were doing back then," he said, "they're doing again, and now they've refined it." Duke didn't just recognize a scent. He remembered a secret someone tried to bury in a desert, but the desert had a nose. And it was back. The message arrived at 6:47 a.m. sharp, blinking on Marcus's secure line with a header stamped in red. Federal Directive. Immediate K9 handler complements required. It came with a digital seal from Homeland's Advanced Tactical Assets Division. A division Marcus had heard about but never interacted with. The message read coldly, efficiently, as though written by someone who knew how to use language as a weapon. Handler Bell, you are hereby ordered to report with Unit K9 773, Duke to Facility 42, Sector 3C, Regan National, by 1300 hours for classified reassignment and recalibration protocol under Executive Clearance Order Omega-4. Non-compliance will result in administrative escalation. No name, no contact number, just the directive. Just an address that didn't exist on any airport map. He stared at the screen, unmoving, pulse starting to rise. Elizabeth wasn't answering her phone. Jordan was en route to meet with a contact at DARPA. Latoya had flown to Colorado Springs to pressure an FAA whistleblower. He was alone, just him and Duke. He opened the back of his truck and watched as the dog leapt inside with the same calm strength he always carried, eyes sharp, tongue hanging slightly, tail wagging once in comfort. Duke didn't know he was being summoned to have his memory torn apart. Marcus knew something wasn't right, but he couldn't ignore it outright. If he didn't show up, they'd escalate. If he did, He'd have to find a way to stall. Maybe Elizabeth could delay the transfer once he got inside. Maybe it was just a meeting. Maybe they didn't know what Duke really was. He arrived at the perimeter checkpoint 20 minutes ahead of schedule and was escorted by 2 uniformed men in unmarked tactical gear. No badges, no insignia, just sidearms and mirrored sunglasses. One led him through a concrete loading corridor, the air thick with ammonia and metal, while the other radioed ahead. Marcus caught a glimpse of Duke's reflection in the steel paneling, alert, ears forward, sniffing with increasing unease. That was when Marcus knew. Duke didn't like this place, he didn't trust it, which meant Marcus couldn't either. They reached a door labeled 42E, no windows, just a keypad. The lead guard entered a code, and the lock disengaged with a pneumatic hiss. Inside was a white-walled room with a single observation window and 2 restraints bolted into the floor, dog restraints. Next to them, a surgical cart. Marcus's fists clenched. A woman in a black turtleneck stepped into view behind the glass. She tapped a mic, handler bell. "Thank you for bringing K9 773. Please place him in the restraints and step out of the room." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Not until you tell me what this is." Her expression didn't shift. "This animal has been selected for memory sequence extraction. Your presence is no longer required. You've been reassigned." Marcus's chest tightened. "Duke's not a hard drive. You can't just wipe him." "You're not wiping," she said. "We're updating. He's being integrated into a new cognitive response framework, optimized for non-personal detection. No bias, no memory, no handler dependency. The dog is a liability as..." In that moment, Marcus's mind snapped back to the Helmand Valley, to the heat and the static and the silence before an IED detonated. Duke had dragged him from the flames. That dog didn't just remember, he chose. That loyalty wasn't programmable. Marcus turned to Duke and gave a hand signal. Duke's eyes locked on his, then back to the door. "We're leaving," Marcus said. "Now." The door hadn't fully closed. Marcus shoved it outward and slammed his shoulder into the guard behind it, catching him off balance. Alarms sounded instantly, red lights flashing across the ceiling. The second guard drew his weapon, but Duke launched forward with a blur of motion, knocking the man flat. Marcus grabbed the gun, yanked Duke's harness and sprinted into the main hallway. Footsteps pounded behind them. Marcus ducked under a security gate just before it slammed shut. More shouting, more movement. Duke ran ahead, nose twitching rapidly, leading not just away from the danger but towards something else. A trail. Blood. A scent he knew. It wasn't Marcus's, it wasn't old. It was fresh. They veered down a maintenance tunnel that hadn't been used in years. Pipes lined the ceiling. Mold slicked the walls. A sign hung crookedly, sub-level 1B access. Duke stopped briefly, pawed the air, then ran. Marcus followed without question. Behind them, the noise faded, swallowed by the concrete and dripping echoes of a forgotten infrastructure. Duke skidded around a corner and pawed at a rusted vent grate. Marcus yanked it free. Inside was a service shaft, steep, narrow, but passable. Duke dove in. Marcus followed. The shaft led to a steel hatch half submerged in water. Duke waited, eyes fixed on the edges. Marcus listened and heard nothing. He turned the wheel. The hatch creaked open, and cold air poured in. They emerged in a cavernous substructure beneath the old terminal, part of an abandoned Cold War fallout shelter repurposed in the 80s as a classified transport passage. It was supposed to have been decommissioned, it hadn't been. As Marcus and Duke crept deeper, lights flickered above them. Duke's hackles rose. Marcus smelled it too, iron, oil, ozone. Not from machinery, from something recent. A drop of blood led around the corner. Someone else had come this way. Someone who hadn't made it out. Jordan sat cross-legged on the motel bed, the dull hum of the air conditioner behind her barely registering as she scrolled through flight records on her laptop. She'd gained temporary access to FAA internal logs, using a borrowed credential from her DARPA contact just long enough to extract 2 weeks' worth of encrypted tail numbers, cargo manifests, and pilot schedules tied to unauthorized route deviations. The data wasn't complete, but it didn't need to be. She wasn't looking for a full map. She was hunting for a pattern, and that pattern was starting to take shape like ghost handwriting bleeding through the paper. There were 5 flights within the last 7 months that matched the signature from DARPA orbital blind spots. Enough began with standard transatlantic departure codes, but then, mid-route, altered headings by a fraction. Enough to avoid certain monitoring zones. Enough to align with DARPA orbital blind spots. Enough to hide. She matched tail numbers against pilot names. Most were rotated weekly. One, however, showed up in 3 of the 5 flights. Captain Terrence Franklin. That stopped her cold. She recognized the name from FAA memorial records. Franklin had died 6 months ago, self-inflicted gunshot, inside a hangar outside Chicago. No note, no investigation. Her chest tightened as she pulled up the archived security report. The body had been found by a groundskeeper. The pilot was sitting in his uniform, gun in his hand, face calm, like he had already made peace with something unbearable. She pulled his file, flight record spotless, awards, multiple commendations, and then a quiet request for medical leave 2 weeks before his death, reason undisclosed. What caught her eye wasn't the silence. It was the pattern. He had been assigned to all 3 suspicious flights, including one where the cargo manifest had been altered post-departure, just like NX 215. She picked up her phone, fingers suddenly shaking, and called LaToya. It rang twice. Then, "Jordan? Everything okay?" Jordan's voice was lower than usual. "Do you have a brother?" The silence on the line stretched long enough to be a sentence. Then LaToya's voice returned quieter. "Send me what you have." Jordan emailed the file, then said nothing. A minute passed. Then LaToya called back. "It's him, the flight records. That's his ID code. I hadn't seen it since they cleaned out his locker." "Didn't know?" Jordan said carefully. "You never mentioned." "He didn't leave a note," LaToya interrupted. "He just disappeared from himself. For a while before it happened, he got quiet. Not in a burnout way. In a, I'm carrying something I can't share way." Jordan's throat tightened. "LaToya, the manifest for one of his final flights matches the signature Duke picked up. There's a correlation. I think he knew he did," LaToya said, her voice cracking slightly. "The last time we spoke, he said, 'You ever fly something and realize you don't even know what's inside your own plane?' I thought he meant classified cargo, or just exhaustion. But he wasn't joking. He meant..." "Didn't you say anything?" "Because I didn't want it to be true," she whispered. "Because it meant he died carrying a secret that someone wanted him to choke on." Jordan rubbed her temples, a slow panic rising. "LaToya, I think the cargo from those flights, I think whatever your brother transported, it's connected to Stratos Dynamics, to Krasik, and to the shipment Duke found." LaToya's breath hitched. "Then, he didn't just fly it. He uncovered it. I think he tried to report it," Jordan added. "There's a buried signal log in one of the FAA entries. An unsent communication packet from his cockpit, time-stamped 2 hours before his last route deviation. It was flagged as corrupted, but that's a lie. Someone blocked it. I've seen this kind of packet block before. It's a military override signature." LaToya's heart dropped. They silenced him. He tried to speak, someone made sure he couldn't. On the other end of the line, LaToya stood in the middle of a darkened hotel room near Colorado Springs, staring at a framed photo she always kept in her suitcase. Her and Terrence, both in uniform, standing in front of a Gulf Stream. He'd always been the calm one, the quiet pilot, the one who made her believe you could hold command without raising your voice. And now he had been erased, not just from records, but from meaning. Until now. "Where are Marcus and Duke?" she asked suddenly. "Hiding," Jordan replied. "Last I heard, they found an abandoned subterminal beneath Reagan, old Cold War facility. They're laying low until we can coordinate extraction. Then we bring this to them. We bring Terrence to them. On the rest..." LaToya's voice was steady now, steel sharpened in sorrow. "We use my brother's death as proof that this isn't just an operation. It's a murder disguised as protocol." Jordan opened a secure line and uploaded everything to an encrypted drive. "I'll meet you at the fallback point. 70 minutes. LaToya clicked off. Then she whispered to the dark, "I'm sorry, Terry. I should have known." But the dead were starting to speak, and this time she would listen. The warehouse in Quantico had been cleared for demonstration purposes only, according to the official memo signed by Homeland and rubber-stamped by 3 federal agencies that hadn't agreed on anything in years. Inside, rows of pallets stretched across the polished floor, each containing cargo certified as clean, non-hazardous, and routinely scanned under standard aviation security protocols. There were camera crews from 5 major networks, a half-dozen independent watchdog journalists, and 24 Department of Transportation observers seated behind velvet ropes, all watching in quiet anticipation. The room was cold, sterile, and pulsing with tension. In the center of the floor stood Duke still, focused, his black and brown coat sleek under the floodlights, amber eyes scanning. Beside him, Marcus, wearing his old handler vest, nodded once to the moderator at the podium. "You're ready," he said. The moderator cleared his throat, voice echoing through the high rafters. "This is a Level 2 olfactory detection test, supervised by federal observers and independent security auditors. The canine handler has not been briefed on container positions. Among these 248 sealed cargo units, one has been identified by TSA as containing material formerly flagged as suspicious, but cleared after review. The rest are routine commercial goods, clothing, electronics, perishables. The canine will now attempt to identify any anomalies." A quiet murmur passed through the room. Camera shutters clicked. Duke's ears perked as Marcus gave a silent hand signal. The shepherd sprang forward into the maze of crates, sniffing with practiced intent. He passed rows of boxes without hesitation, skipping 20, ignoring 50, circling back only once to recheck the scent of a unit marked CSP fiber optic cable. After 10 minutes he stopped, sat, head tilted slightly, eyes fixed on one specific container labeled Syntec Tools Maintenance Parts Flight Designated -793. Silence fell. Marcus exhaled slowly. "There it is." The moderator blinked. "Please confirm the crate number?" "Unit 3 Charlie 7, one of the observers confirmed, stepping forward. "Get that's the one cleared by TSA," and the crate was brought forward, opened under observation, and its contents laid bare. Sealed plastic housings, synthetic polymer sheets, and what appeared to be specialized thermal insulation. It all looked standard, but Hall brought in from the previous lab testing was already scanning with UV and electromagnetic sensors. Within minutes, he lifted one piece of insulation to the light, and the same compound, he said flatly. "Same as what we found on the boards from flight NX-215. The coatings designed to mimic legal cargo on scanners." A gasp spread across the rows of observers. One of the federal agents stepped forward. "This container passed all protocols. Are you suggesting a detection failure?" "No," Hall replied. "I'm stating one. Your machines got fooled. The dog didn't." Jordan stepped beside the cameras. "Is this all being recorded?" "Yes," the lead producer nodded. "We're live honoring to 5 platforms. It's airing in real time." But even as he spoke, one of the technicians nearby received a sudden burst of alerts on her tablet. "The feeds are being pulled," she said, "one by one." The producer turned pale. "What? Who?" She pointed. "Emergency digital override. NSO classification code, national security order. They're citing Title 50. Someone's locking this down." Jordan cursed under her breath. But before she could act, a man in a dark blue suit seated quietly in the back until now, stood up and walked toward the front with a calm but deliberate pace. His ID badge read, Rep. Cedric Vaughn, Oversight Subcommittee Chair. He addressed the crowd without taking the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've seen enough." Someone called out, "Sir, the stream is down. We won't have a broadcast record." Vaughn didn't blink. "You'll have a hearing." He turned toward the security observers. "As of this moment, I'm filing an emergency motion to convene a classified session with the Homeland Security Committee and Congressional Oversight. I'm requesting the full log of this test and every file related to chlorocarbon materials routed through commercial flights in the past 12 months. A ripple of murmurs turned into a low hum of tension. The moderator stepped forward. "Congressman, with all due respect." "You want to talk about respect?" Vaughn interrupted, voice cold now. "Respect is when a decorated war dog identifies a threat your billion-dollar systems can't see, and instead of listening you silence the cameras. This isn't about protocol anymore, it's about accountability. Duke sat beside Marcus without moving, tail still, eyes sharp. He hadn't barked once. He didn't need to. The evidence was in the silence. The chamber of the Congressional Oversight Committee was colder than expected, built more for order than comfort, with its high ceilings, gleaming mahogany desks, and tight rows of cameras tucked strategically into corners. On the C-SPAN feed, the headline read in sober font, "Hearing on Aviation Security Breach and Cargo Tampering Allegations, Day 1. But what it should have said was something closer to, "The moment truth became dangerous." On the raised platform, repeated Cedric Vaughn sat flanked by 6 other members of Congress, all grim-faced and sleep-deprived, fielding testimony from experts, engineers, and whistleblowers. Jordan sat behind the witness panel beside LaToya and Professor Hall, clutching a folder of declassified lab reports and forensic photos. Marcus stood quietly near the rear exit, Duke seated at his heel, hidden from sight behind a panel partition. They weren't supposed to be here. Duke had no official role in the hearing, but Vaughn had whispered before the session started, "If there's a moment, trust me, I'll signal you." That moment came sooner than anyone expected. Midway through the afternoon session, the doors opened with a subtle click, and the sergeant-at-arms stepped forward. The committee now recognizes Mr. Ivan Krasik, special technology consultant and former defense contractor liaison, appearing under federal subpoena. Gasps murmured through the gallery. Ivan walked in like he owned oxygen talls, silver-haired, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that had never seen a wrinkle. His presence carried a sheen of diplomatic immunity, even though no one had said it out loud. He took his seat, placed a slim leather briefcase beside the microphone, and folded his hands with a disarming calm. Chairman Vaughn addressed him coolly. "Mr. Krasik, you've been named in multiple leaked shipping manifests and off-book communications. These documents tie you to an international transport network moving low-carbon technology in violation of FAA and NATO codes. How do you respond?" Ivan leaned forward, accent faint but deliberate. "You understand the concerns raised, Congressman, but let me be clear. Stratos Dynamics operates under federal contract for the development of adaptive shielding materials. Our work supports humanitarian supply chains, data resilience, and battlefield medical transport. We are not smuggling weapons. We are not undermining security." He scoffed under his breath. Jordan shot him a glance. Ivan continued, "Yes, chlorcarbon can bypass traditional scanners. That's the point. It allows secure movement of life-saving medical prototypes through contested zones. What your experts have found are test unit simulations, dummy payloads. No threat, only misinterpretation." Vaughn pressed him for. Ivan offered a diplomatic smile. "Because anonymity protects lives. In regions where instability reigns, disclosure invites interception. Our only error was trusting machines to understand nuance. But dogs," he gestured vaguely toward the back of the room, "are noble yet flawed. They detect change, not danger." It was a statement meant to disarm, to reset the room, but Vaughn's fingers tapped 3 times on the table. Marcus nodded to Duke. Silently, the German shepherd stood, ears forward, posture tight. As he stepped out from behind the partition, the crowd shifted. Journalists raised their cameras. Duke moved with purpose, not rushed but unstoppable, heading down the center aisle straight toward the witness table. No leash, no command, just instinct, just memory. Ivan's eyes flickered briefly, a half-second twitch most wouldn't notice. Duke reached the table and stopped beside the briefcase. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He sat tail stiff, body frozen, and let out a single deep-chested whine. Everyone held their breath. Vaughn's voice came like steel wrapped in velvet. "Mr. Krasik, what's in that case?" Ivan didn't move. "Documents, my prepared statement, charts." "Open it," Vaughn said. "That's privileged," Ivan replied. "Corporate IP, protected under pending litigation." Vaughn didn't flinch. "We'll redact later, open it now." A federal marshal stepped forward. Reluctantly, Ivan clicked the latch. Inside were neatly stacked folders, and a sealed, transparent casing containing what appeared to be a non-functional model of a neural chip. A display piece, labeled mock-up in bold letters. Jordan stood. "We've seen these. They're used in investor briefings. Non-operational. Harmless." Duke didn't move. Hall pushed his way forward. "Let me see it." Vaughn nodded. Granted. Hall slipped on gloves, pulled the casing free, examined the label under light, then peeled the back corner. The word mock-up lifted like a sticker. Beneath it, ZIX-17 is real. Fully etched. This chip has an active lattice. This isn't a prototype. This is a production unit. Gasps exploded from the rows of observers. Jordan's voice cut through it. He brought it into this room, smuggled it in under false pretense. If Duke hadn't, Vaughn's gavel slammed. This hearing is now entering closed session. Reporters were escorted out. Cameras turned off. The room sealed. But not before one thing had become irrevocably clear. Duke didn't detect change. He remembered the truth. And now everyone else did too. The news spread before the courtroom even cleared. Ivan Krasik had been arrested by federal agents before he could step outside the building. Charged with trafficking undeclared surveillance tech across international borders, obstruction of federal proceedings, and falsification of defense records. By the end of the week, every known shipment tied to Clocarbon was frozen under emergency review, and the FAA suspended all contracts involving Stratos Dynamics and its affiliates pending full investigation. The media dubbed it the Ghost Tech Scandal, but inside the circles that mattered, it was being called something else, the Dog's Line. In the days that followed, Duke's photo appeared across the country on newspaper front pages, government memos, school posters, even mural sketches in airport terminals. A black and tan German shepherd sitting tall beside a locked crate, amber eyes unflinching. A caption beneath it read, "The nose that found what maximum scowl." Marcus Bell was reinstated quietly but with full honors. His old badge, now reissued with a new classification, came with a simple letter from the DHS director. "We got it wrong. You didn't." Elizabeth Winters was promoted to lead the Internal Reform Committee at TSA, and later testified to the ethics subpanel about institutional blind spots and the cost of dismissing instinct in favor of algorithm. Jordan Ellis published a Pulitzer finalist exposé titled The Scent of Secrecy, which led to the passage of the Canine Whistleblower Protection Act, an actual piece of legislation that ensured any canine's alert, no matter the scan result, triggered independent review. LaToya Franklin received posthumous commendation on behalf of her brother, Captain Terrence Franklin, whose name was finally cleared and entered into the National Aviation Hall of Integrity. Professor Hall was tapped by the National Science Board to chair a new oversight council for biometric detection ethics. And Duke, well, Duke became something far more than a canine unit. He became a symbol. 6 months later, under the gold-streaked autumn sky of Washington, D.C., a crowd of nearly 5,000 gathered at Reagan National Airport for a ceremony that was both commemorative and transformative. On a stage set against the backdrop of a grounded military transport plane stood Marcus Bell in his formal uniform. Sleeves crisp, shoes shined, Duke seated beside him with a navy blue medal draped across his broad shoulders. The plaque beneath Duke's paw print read, "To the one who stood between deception and truth, not with a voice but with trust." Representatives from across the country, both parties, former critics and early believers, were seated in the first few rows. Sarah Taylor from CBS had the exclusive, but every outlet carried the broadcast. A gentle breeze moved through the flags behind the podium as Marcus stepped forward, cleared his throat, and looked not at the cameras but at Duke. "I used to believe that only humans carried justice," Marcus began, his voice steady but thick with something unspoken. "Used to think that the responsibility for truth burdened by law and ethics was something only we could hold. But I was wrong. There's a different kind of integrity. One that doesn't hide behind credentials or memos. One that doesn't weigh consequences before deciding whether to act. One that just knows," he said, reaching down to gently rest a hand on Duke's shoulder. Never asked to be a hero. He was trained to detect, not decide. To alert, not accuse. But when every scanner failed, when every protocol was blind, when the most powerful people insisted there was nothing to see, he didn't waver. He didn't doubt. He just sat down in front of the lie and waited. The crowd was silent, not out of politeness but gravity. Marcus's voice lowered, more intimate now. "You know, people ask me what makes a good officer. Some say it's courage, others say discipline. But I think it's something simpler. I think it's consistency, reliability. a refusal to be moved by anything other than the truth. Duke never once hesitated when it mattered most, and that's why I believe he's more than a partner. He's the last lock on the gate. He's what we stand behind when all our systems fail. He looked out over the crowd now, eyes scanning those watching from screens, terminals, homes. Today, when we honor him, we're not just honoring a dog, we're honoring what he represents. In a world racing towards synthetic detection and machine learning, it was a living, breathing creature without a microphone or algorithm, who reminded us of something timeless, that the truth doesn't need an update, it just needs someone brave enough to smell it. Marcus stepped back from the mic, and after a moment of silence, the crowd rose as one. Applause rolled like thunder across the tarmac, echoing against hangars and terminals, carried far by wind and reverence. Duke, unmoved by the noise, glanced up at Marcus once, as if asking if it was time to go. Marcus knelt beside him, wrapped an arm around his shoulder, and whispered, "You did it, boy." From that day forward, Duke was given the honorary title National Sentinel Canine by unanimous congressional vote. His new vest bore the stitched phrase, "The Last Gatekeeper." Schools taught his story as part of ethics and civics programs, and every new airport canine team trained with a module named after him. The Duke Protocol, direct, unfiltered, kinetic. But for Marcus, none of the medals or titles mattered as much as the quiet moments, early morning patrols. Duke beside him, calm as ever. There were still bad people out there, still shadows pretending to be light. But now, they knew someone was watching, and his nose never lied. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the next investigations and untold truths. Which twist hit you the hardest? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I read every one.